Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hello, everyone. It's Sasha here for another interview for the Sovereign Collective podcast. And today I am doing a duo podcast here with my hubby, Tim, because we are going into a matter that he is a lot more well-versed in than I am. And so our guest today is Dr. Frederick Graves, and he's a man on a mission to help each of us, the common person, to win in court with a lawyer or without a lawyer. And I think this is super important information because in a world today where we have, kind of handed everything over to the experts, whether they be the lawyers or the doctors or the scientists or the educators, I don't think that's working out very well for us. So when we can take this into our own hands and take full responsibility and be adults, be men and women, I think we can find a lot more success and a lot less difficulty and peril that often these situations find us in when we hand it over. So thank you, Dr. Graves. I really appreciate your time today. I know we're going to have a great discussion. We've got some great questions for you. And thanks for joining us. And thank you for doing what you're doing and making it. So this is a course. You offer a course. He offers a course. And I haven't looked at it yet, but Tim is going through it right now. And I know I'm going to get to it too. And so this is what we're going to be talking about and why this is so essential for many of us, most of us, to learn. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And let's get on with it.
Thank you for giving me another opportunity to share this message, which should have been shared 100 years ago or more. But now we have the internet, and apparently I've gotten the jump on other people. And the idea that what I learned in law school you should know all that. You should have been taught that in high school. So now we're going to do what we can do with the howtowinincourt.com website and the idea that you have this right. I call it your number one right. If you can have all these other rights, you can talk about your rights and complain about how your rights are being taken from you and all that. But your number one right is to know what I teach. Because if you don't know what I teach, you have to hire a lawyer. And if you have to mortgage the home and hope you get a good lawyer and all of that, well, that doesn't seem right. But you have the right to enforce your rights. And if you can't enforce your rights, then they're promises.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
It does. And the first question that comes to mind just from based on what you're saying is, like, do you have any ideas or anything? Like, why are we not taught this stuff? Like, we're taught a lot of stuff when we go through school, but most of it we don't use, I don't think. But we're not taught real fundamental.
That's a great question, and let's stick with that one for just a minute. If hold here just a second. Here's my book on contracts. I actually read all of this and a bunch of other books. You can't get a child to read these books.
Yeah,
they just won't. They won't. But believe it or not, I can open this book to almost any page. I just will. Let's see. I'll pick one here. Just a minute. Well, I have to turn here. We'll go back. Sarnoff versus American Home Products is one of. Here we go. I'm just looking through all here. Central Adjustment Bureau versus Ingram and so forth and so on. every case that we read in law school is just a story. It's just a story about people who had an issue with some other people or a corporation or the government. And that's all it is. You know, it's so simple. But when I went to law school, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the ability to create animations. And sooner or later, we're going to get this into the schools. For right now, if you want to learn how to win in court, you don't really have to know contracts. You don't have to know torts. You don't have to know property. You certainly don't have to know everything I learned in law school. But you ought to be able to understand the rules of evidence. It's because it's easy. You ought to be able to understand how to make an objection. I mean, just those two things alone that I teach in the course. If people just knew those two things, there'd be far fewer people in prison, far fewer people losing their children and not knowing what to do. Kids are gone. What can I do? And what's come up to me over the years is it really is not rocket science. Litigation is a game. It has rules, just like baseball. And why the people haven't been told this, I think, is because the people that have control, they have these big, thick books that they force people to read in law school. And it's never occurred to anybody, perhaps, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe just never occurred to anybody that it really is simple and it can be taught. Certainly could be taught over a 12-year period, and you'd know everything I learned in law school. But just in 12 hours with my course, you'll understand the rules of evidence, you'll understand causes of action, essential elements that have to be pleaded and proven, and you'll understand how to make courtroom objections to control the judge. That's it. I just don't think, maybe somebody's just never figured it out yet. I figured it out. And it
Well,
works.
I think you also have a moral code that you follow, because every one of us knows somebody that has had some shyster lawyer they've paid tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to, and they still haven't received any kind of resolution or anything in their favor. And it appears that the lawyer wasn't even working for them in the first place.
Well, that's unfortunately true about a lot of litigators. I try to defend other lawyers who do property and wills and trusts and things like that. Almost every one of those that I ever met was just a really nice person trying to do a good job, probably charging more money than it's really worth to do it. But in litigators, it just seemed like they just pull out all the stops and so forth. And as far as the moral code goes, I really want to say this. You know, whether you want to believe in God or whether you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Sikh, doesn't really matter. But when you contemplate this carpenter that they drove nails in his hands and feet, and he was innocent, and they knew he was innocent, and they broke the law, the high priest of Israel, who was also the chief judge, they broke the law. And to nail this innocent person to a cross, well, that's my moral code in a nutshell. You know, I don't have to read the Bible to understand that. I don't think a child has to read the Bible to understand that. We shouldn't be nailing people to crosses, and certainly we shouldn't be nailing people to crosses when they're innocent. And it's happening every single day. It will happen during the period of time while you are kindly and thankfully interviewing me, because I want to tell this to the world. We've got to stop this nonsense. We've got to control the judiciary. We've got to get that knowledge that they have out in the open for the people to understand about the power that is controlling their lives from the cradle to the grave, and unfortunately, changing the very concept of what morality is and what's right and wrong. It's got to be done. And so you're giving me this opportunity to speak to people. I really appreciate it. I want to speak to more people, more and more and more. And it's not about selling my course. It's about the message. You have a right if you know how to enforce it. You can control these people that are out of control, that are running your schools and teaching your children things that you really don't believe in. And yet you feel powerless because, number one, you don't know what's going on. Number two, you can't afford a lawyer. You go to a lawyer's office about this, they don't take these cases on a contingency fee. This isn't one of those things, you don't pay us unless we win. No, they want money up front. And to take on the school board, most lawyers that are going to be any good are going to want $50,000 up front. And people that have children in school, they don't have $50,000 to throw away. So here we are. Let's teach these people out there, all around the world, we've got to teach people that you have this power. It isn't difficult. Learn the rules of evidence, learn how to make objections, learn what the elements are that have to be proven in any particular case. And now you've got everything. That's really how simple it is. Allege, prove, move. That's it. And why weren't we told? I just think nobody thought of it before. And now
I think you're kind.
I think it's a very generous
I
perspective.
don't know if nobody's ever thought of it. I mean, we have all this double speak, right, in the lawyering world, the doctor world, the science world, to make us think that we're not smart enough to understand it. I think you're being very kind when nobody's thought of it. I think maybe, personally, my opinion, that it might have been set up that way. Perhaps.
Well, I like to, for political purposes, I like to give them benefit of the doubt and just say, well, maybe they've just been negligent about it. But certainly somebody in the back of their mind. I do remember that I was at a local bar meeting in Florida not too long ago, and the dean of the law school of the University of Florida, which was the biggest law school in Florida, the dean came to speak to a group of us lawyers and judges. And the first words out of his mouth were, legal education in this country is failing. Well, my gosh, if legal education at the law school level is failing, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So what seems to be clear to me, and I seem to have been successful in convincing other people about this, is that we have to give the power to the people and stop letting the power just continually rising and rising and rising into these offices where people don't even believe that there's such a thing as a God or consequence for our actions and so forth and so on, and take this power back, or at least understand what it is so that we can control it. And it's doable. If it wasn't doable, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have had 26 years of helping tens of thousands of people that have learned how to win in court. But it can be done. In the meantime, the judiciary is ultimate power in this country and in other countries. In India, they call the judiciary the bulldog of the people. That's where the buck stops. And right now we've got people in the judiciary that don't seem to know mud from sand.
So before we get into specific questions, can we just back up just a little bit? Because you started your law education a bit later in life than somebody just going from from high school to post-secondary. So can you back up as to, like, give us a little bit of an idea of, like, you have all these interesting skills and interests and things like that. What were you doing before? What made you be not one of those other lawyers? When did you see this? Was it during your education? While you were actually representing people? Like, what brought you to this awareness that something's wrong here?
Well, I'm at the risk of offending some people or making them think that I'm some kind of a nut. I've kind of had the idea from a very early age when I first saw the stained glass window of seemed like a nice young man with holes in his hands and feet. I've kind of had the idea for a long time, something must be wrong. And I think that was probably my first thought when I looked up at that stained glass window at a church where my grandmother took me when I was probably 5. And I think I said, well, what is this? And, I've sown my oats and done all these other things. There's nothing great about me. I'm not a special person in any way. It's just that I think I was led down a path to finally begin to decide it's time for me to find out these things. And I had an opportunity to live on boats for a very long time. So I didn't have a television set. I didn't have a car. For a short time, I had a bicycle. But for probably 9 years of my life, when I went to sleep at night, there was, water 3 feet under me, and I mean below the hull, and I didn't have any entertainment but books. And my grandfather had read the Harvard classics, so I got a set of Harvard classics. So I read Franklin and Woolman and Penn and Marcus Aurelius and Adams, and got into other books, Adams and Washington and Paine and all these people that had this idea that we could have a democratic republic and it would operate in a certain way. And this is how it works. And I was fascinated by it. And I ended up meeting a young fellow in New Jersey who was building, I had built my 33-foot double ender that I was living in at the time. And I met this young fellow, he was building a 30-foot catamaran up in New Jersey. And we got to be friends. He ended up going to undergraduate school and then going to law school. And then we were sitting out in his backyard one day, and he said, "Well, why don't you sit for the LSAT?" I was teaching in a private school. I was teaching chemistry and physics at the time, and it was just a challenge. I said, "Oh, well, okay, sure, I'll do it. I'll just prove I'm just as smart as you are, Jim." That was his name, Jim. And so I took the LSAT, and apparently I scored very well, which doesn't mean I'm any smarter than anybody else. I really believe that about tests, but it just happened to be the particular test system that they have for the LSAT is a very peculiar thing. It's fun to look into, but it just seemed to resonate with the way I think. And apparently I scored very high. And so I told the headmaster at the school where I was teaching, I was making $4,000 a year. I was really rolling in the dough.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Well, but they gave me a house to live in.
Yeah.
Oh, nice little house and $4,000 a year, and I was teaching chemistry and physics and biology, and I was having a good life. So I said, well, I'll apply to one law school, and if they're stupid enough to admit me, I'll go. If they don't, I'll stay here and teach in your school for the rest of my life. And I was committed to that. And they admitted me. And from the very beginning, they understood that I was kind of a campaigner. I was on a campaign, well, for the innocent. I think the innocent should be protected. And I think that if you want a better world, you've got to have a better judiciary. You've got to have a better legal profession. You've got to have people that take this seriously, the way Franklin and Woolman and Penn and Marcus Aurelius took everything seriously. People today, lawyers today are technicians. They learn how to play this game, and it doesn't matter what's right or wrong. It's win at all costs. And the bar itself in our continuing legal education studies actually understand that. They make this point. It's part of the reason that the bar associations exist, is to control lawyers who are out of control, who want to win at any cost. They'll pull out all the stops. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they'll lie to the judge. It happens all the time. I did it for years. But now it seems to me that because of the internet and because of people like you who are taking an interest in the possibility that we could make the world a better place by understanding this most important part of government, not only here, but in England and Australia and New Zealand and Ireland and Isle of Man. I mean, why not? If what I say is true, then why don't we learn? Why don't we learn? Why don't we understand that what I learned in law school was, a lot of books. I had to read a lot of books. Every case that I studied, at least 99 out of 100 cases I studied, it was just a story. And that's mostly what we did, is read cases. Actually, what it takes to win and how to control other lawyers and how to control judges, you don't learn that till you get out of law school. You begin to practice. That's why they call it a practice. But after a while, you begin to realize there's a set of rules. And once you know the rules and know how to force the judge to obey the rules and to enforce the rules himself, the rest is a piece of cake.
You
In
know,
the meantime, while we've been
absolutely.
talking, I will bet you a box of donuts right now that while we've been talking, 3 people, maybe 30 people, maybe more, got locked up behind bars somewhere in the United States of America, and they're going to sit there until somebody gets around to, letting them go to an arraignment and plead guilty or not guilty. I'll bet you that during this period of time that we've been talking, 2 or 3 people lost their children. Their children were taken away. Or certainly many people's children will be taken away today in this country. And some of it for good reason. There are grandfathers that like to put out cigars on their granddaughters' legs. I mean, this is something we know exists. But there are other people having their children taken away for no good reason and losing their homes and losing their businesses and losing their hope and faith in the American principles and just the principles of the democratic republic and how it's supposed to operate. And I think we all are beginning to realize it's not operating the way it's supposed to operate. It's not operating the way it was planned. So either we give the people the power to do this so that they can control the people in high places, or we can sit around and imagine, like, let's all just imagine that somehow people in high places are just going to start doing what's right just by osmosis. No.
Right. What comes to mind for me listening to you speak and kind of pulling some of the pieces together that we've already covered is something that we came across and just kind of reading up on your background and things was this is a connection between learning and books. And it was, you had written that at least at the time of the writing, you'd said that you basically you don't read books after written after World War I. And you're also sitting there on a boat, kind of cut off from the mainstream media, from all these things. So like even our kids have a tremendous uphill battle just because of the access to things, of being indoctrinated and influenced into whatever comes through those digital devices and what they want you to think. And so just those ideas of like, I'm curious as to why you're not a fan of books that are after World War I, and also connecting to, I think that just helps us think differently, being interested into things that are typically or not mainstream.
And I think also to add to that, because what really has been revealed in the last several years of this crazy world is most of what we've been taught is not true. I truly believe that any kind of historical fact is not a fact, right? It's written by those who want you to think a certain way. So yeah, can you talk to us about why you chose World War I as the date at which is the cutoff to get your information from?
Well, it might sound a little strange, but you see, again, part of what we learned in law school, we read cases. Some of those cases went back to England because, we inherited the common law from England, which basically people don't even know what the common law is. Common law is nothing but a collection of appellate court opinions. And the best appellate court opinions are old. The best appellate court opinions took place really in the 18th century in this country at the very beginning. I have a book over here, which is the very beginning, the first few years of the United States Supreme Court opinions. And you read those and you find out these people actually knew how to use English effectively. And they had a particular point of view that I agree with. And then later on, what happened, I think we had this thing called the Civil War, and things began to get out of kilter. Then we had World War I, and we sent our boys over to Europe. That wasn't our fight. I just recently read a book called The Power of Words. It's a collection of writings by Churchill. And he explains about that, how the boys over here went over there. We That's who we were. We were the good guys. But we went over there. Now we have mechanized warfare, World War One, and the gas in the trenches, and the beginning of aviation, and airborne weapons. And I think we began to really lose our mind. And then we had World War II, and whereas before the bomb, I like to believe that our boys, most of the boys, almost every last one of them, they did their best not to bomb schoolhouses. They did their best not to bomb hospitals. And then we didn't just destroy, it wasn't just Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It could have been an island, an unpopulated island we could have caused to disappear. But no, we killed people. And if you read the cases, if you read these old appellate court opinions, the closer you get to now, I mean, we've got appellate court opinions coming out now that are just absolutely insane, written by people that just, they don't know how to think. It's crazy. I don't know how much time you've got, but it just, without even taking a position on abortion one way or the other, because I avoid doing that. I have my own opinions. But if you read Roe versus Wade, for example, you find these people trying to justify their decision by saying that the ancient Romans or somebody used to take their children out, early born children, and let them die, put them on a rock somewhere and let them die. And somehow they use that as a justification for their decisions. There's a more recent one. They did the same thing, talking about what somebody else did in another country years ago. What's got to do with American justice? Nothing. The people in this country need to understand that American justice, the system, the primary principles like that, the primary principles of American justice are beautiful. They're worth fighting for. They're worth standing up for. They're certainly worth learning and sharing with your neighbors, but the people don't know what they are. And I find increasingly that the legal profession doesn't know what they are. And that worries me. It really, really worries me. The people don't know what the primary principles of justice are. The lawyers don't care. And I don't think the law schools are promoting it. And so there we are. So now the challenge is, will the American people roll up their sleeves and make up their minds that we are going to find out what this stuff is really all about? Because this man Graves has come along and he says it's easy to learn. Mm-hmm. And I've proven it. For over a quarter of a century, I have proven that people from every walk of life can learn this and have this power to control people that are out of their mind, control evil, control corruption, or you can sit back and complain about it. I don't think complaining about it is where it's at. And again, go back to what we said about World War I. Our boys got on ships and went over to Europe to fight somebody else's fight. Today, I can't even get people, well, excuse me, it's hard to get people to just read a book, for heaven's sakes. Those boys went over there and gave their lives. And it happened again in World War II, and it happened in Korea. And whatever you may think about Vietnam, our boys went to Vietnam and fought somebody else's fight. Yeah. And that's who we were supposed to be. And I think we can be that again. But in order to be that, we need to inculcate these values, these primary principles of justice that make America, or should be making America, what it's supposed to be. And forgive me for talking so long, but I love to talk about this stuff.
No, that's why we're here. We have a couple of hours. I'm totally down for a couple hours.
Okay. So, but I have a question. So, is there a way, are there some basic overreaching principles that can be nutshelled at all? And second of all, we're in Canada, us. And I'm wondering, do these principles apply across borders? Is this applicable no matter where you're at, or only specific countries, or who is this for? Who can learn?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I've been invited to work with a very nice couple in England right now that they've they're creating a website. It's called Principles for Principles, the numeral 4 .life, Principles for Life, and we're talking about these primary principles, things that every reasonable person should agree to. And one of those is that it's never right to do wrong.
Basic. There's some basic principles for you.
The ends do not justify the means. Probability is not proof. I mean, come on. There are people in prison right now that should be home with their families. They ought to be out having a picnic next Saturday. But no, they're eating cheese sandwiches on white bread, drinking black coffee behind bars, going to the bathroom on a steel toilet that doesn't have a lid. And they didn't do it. But judges allowed probability to be proof. To prove something is to make it certain. certain. I can spell that word. And people are going to prison on circumstantial evidence. I don't know who invented it, but I don't believe in it. I think it's wrong. And then it's abused. All these things that are happening, they don't have to be happening, but the people themselves, for the first time in the history of the world, now have the ability to communicate this information, this system of knowledge, which is what it is, these rules that are simple. I don't know how I can emphasize that anymore. The rules are not rocket science. They're certainly not differential calculus, and you don't have to learn German. It's not hard. But we can do this. And the more that people like you see that this is something that's real, that it is doable, and you make an effort, as you are doing, to convince other people, or maybe we don't like the word convince, it's too strong, to persuade other people, to induce them to see that it's in their own best interest to learn these things, and to begin to force the judiciary to get out from behind the curtain and share with us what these rules are, and share these rules with our children, and share these rules with people who are having their kids taken away or they're going to prison. Everybody in prison ought to be given an opportunity to learn these rules. They ought to have classes in prison where you learn all this stuff instead of having the guys have to go to the prison library and try to noodle it out on their own. It's not right. But who's going to stand up? Who's going to say this is what we ought to be doing? I volunteer. I hope you will. I hope you'll get a bunch of other people to do it, because I can't be around forever. But if I can get enough of you to see the value of this, maybe you'll take the ball and run with it.
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm going through the course, and I find it illuminating and empowering. And it's wild as you know, if you start learning things about the simplicity of what evidence is, what that stipulates evidence, and particularly how to get evidence into the record. Because something that I've witnessed time and time again is people say that they have evidence, but it doesn't actually get in the record. And then of course, the rules of procedure. So rules of evidence, rules of procedure, and just kind of slowing things down, learning, like you said, learning how to object, understanding your major grounds for objection, et cetera. It's extremely empowering. But another thing that it's done for me is it helps me look through a different lens when I see things. Like, for instance, let's say, we're trottling along through, someone lodges a complaint, and then there's a cause of action, and then it trickles on, and then there's the trial, and then there's sentencing, and then maybe after that there's the appeal and this kind of thing. So one of the things I'm really interested in is, like, let's say, like, these people that you're talking about that end up in jail behind bars around circumstantial evidence, for instance. And let's say you've hired a lawyer, and like you're trottling along, and then you come across your course or whatever, and then you realize that your lawyer hasn't gotten some really important elements that could actually cause, say, for instance, reasonable doubt in a criminal case or whatever. And then you're sitting at sentencing or whatever. Let's just pick that spot. And
Is there recourse?
You've had a judgment against you, but they haven't done sentencing. Is there recourse at that? Is there a way to get the stuff in the record? Because, in your program, you say if you don't get it in at the beginning, the appeal process are a really difficult thing. Like, is there hope at that point, or are you hooped because of the only thing that they can draw on is from the record of what didn't happen? Is that a clear question? Do you know what I mean?
Well, it is a little bit. The
Like, is there any part of the process where you're like, you're hooped?
Well, let's go back to what we said a moment ago. The dean of the largest law school in Florida said legal education is failing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have lawyers and judges that don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So rather than address that one particular question, let's look at the problem that caused the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I went to fight against the Trial Lawyers Association in Florida, who got angry. They filed a motion with the Florida Supreme Court to limit the number of requests for admissions that we could have, which is a very powerful tool. And here I went to Tallahassee, drove up to Tallahassee to appear and argue against these people who I think stupidly actually came out. I saw it in our Florida Bar News. They were saying their argument was that some people are using requests for admissions to limit the issues for trial. Well, that's what they're for. As you understand from my course: request for admissions, request for production, interrogatories, depositions, and subpoena power. Those are your 5 tools to get evidence into the record. Well, up until that time, you could have 40, 50, whatever you wanted, admit you were in Chicago on Tuesday, April the 3rd or whatever. And they'd have to answer that. Simple question, didn't take a lot of work. But the trial lawyers didn't want that to be done because they said right there, it's in black and white. They were all upset because some people were using those to limit the issues for trial. Seemed like a good idea to me that they should be used to limit the issues for trial, because maybe people wouldn't have to go to trial and pay the lawyer to go to trial and prepare for trial and then think about it after trial and think about it while he's at lunch and, run the clock while he's having lunch. And if you don't think that happens, then you really, you need to learn more about what's going on. So they went along with it. They went along with the trial lawyers and they limited it on, and ultimately their reason for doing this, with the exception of 2 justices that agreed with me, Justice Anstead and Justice Lewis, agreed with me and wrote a dissent, which made me feel great, but it didn't change the fact that the other justices on the bench went ahead and did this and said, well, the federal rules are limited to 30, so we're going to limit to 30. And I said, no, but that's not what we're here. We're here on the motion from the trial lawyers. And the trial lawyer's motion should be denied. It's insanity. It's foolishness. It's a fraud. It is. It's an absolute fraud. And one of the justices said to me, but Mr. Graves, don't you understand? Judges don't understand discovery. That was said. That's on the record. That's in black and white. We could go find that. Judges don't understand discovery.
So for somebody who's more lay person here, what does that actually mean when he stated that?
Well, for example, cases are won by using interrogatories, which is basically you write a question that your opponent has to answer under oath. It's not rocket science.
Okay.
You get 30 of those in Florida. Other states may give you more. You have 30 days to answer or 45 days to answer, but just a written question. They have to answer it in writing, under oath. Swear to it. Request for production. They have to produce documents and things. Could be a broken letter. Could be a contract. It could be a letter from Aunt Susie. Whatever it is, if it's reasonably calculated to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence, doesn't even have to be admissible evidence. It only has to be reasonably calculated to lead to admissible evidence. They got to turn it over. If they don't turn it over, there's a process you can go through and have them put in jail until they turn it over. That power belongs to you. You do not have to be me to exercise that power. You do not have to go to law school. All you have to do is know what's in my course, howtowinincourt.com. So that's that. The other thing is the request for admissions, interrogatories, request for production. Those are three tools you have that are written. You don't even have to go you don't have to go to court. Deposition, you have to pay for a court reporter, and you don't do that till later on. But what I'm trying to get to is this. Here I was in Tallahassee in front of supposedly people that are men and women are supposed to be smarter than everybody else. That's what they try to tell you. They try to terrify you with all this thing when you're in law school. And ooh, better be afraid of the judges. Most of all, be afraid of the bar. You'll get disbarred if you don't toe the line. Well, I've never been a person to toe the line. So anyway, that's what happened. And I couldn't believe it. Sat there and the other ones kind of nodded. So I guess they all pretty much agreed. Judges have a hard time understanding what discovery is. Discovery is how you win. It's how you get evidence into the record, and it's how you keep the other guy from getting his evidence into the record. And I've been teaching people this for 26 years, people from every walk of life. And so the answer to your question, it's a roundabout. It's a roundabout answer, but the answer is it's because these people are just, they're nuts, and they're arrogant, and they want you to believe they're smarter than God, and your whole world and your children's future hangs in the balance. But we've got the internet now. I mean, there are people out there that say, well, they'll take the internet away from us. Well, I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But in the meantime, if enough of us will learn how to exercise this power of using the court to make the world a better place for everybody, then it may not be too late. We might actually be able to get this out there and eventually get this education into the schools where it should have been all along. It certainly should be. The teaching should be in our prisons. I think the teaching should be in our churches and synagogues. I really do. I mean, I drive around, I see all these houses of worship, so-called, they're sitting empty today. It's Tuesday. I'll bet you a box of donuts that within 10 miles of here, there are 50 so-called houses of worship that are sitting empty right now that could be used to teach the American people what America is all about. But that's another issue. That's something else. I hope maybe somebody will take up that call.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not going to meet any disagreement with that from over here. That's for sure. So kind of like circling that around. So what I'm hearing in how you're responding to that is it's really important to learn what discovery is and how to get things through things like into evidence, such as like a request for admission, a request for production, an interrogatory, the deposition, the subpoena stuff. Now, is there a limit to when you can get that stuff actually entered into the record?
Like, is it too late at sentencing when you've discovered your lawyer didn't do his job? There's plenty of evidence that he did not submit. Is there a way to compel that, or is it just too late at a certain time?
Well, it's not too late. It's not even too late after the sentencing is done. I mean, after somebody's actually in prison, people are being gotten out of prison who didn't do the crime.
Yeah.
Somebody has to file a motion. Somebody has to not be afraid of the judge. Yeah. I've known lawyers who were afraid of the judge. Yeah. Explain that for me.
Right.
How can you take some guy, he's a farmer, or he works on greasy car engines all day. That's his life. And he somehow scraped together enough money to hire you, and you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Or you don't care, or you're afraid of the judge.
Yeah.
I always felt like, and I teach this in the course, I mentioned it in the course, I think that when we go to court, we need to be thinking about Bill and Bob and Johnny, who didn't get to come home from Iwo Jima. I mean, we see the boys putting the lifting the flag, and God bless them. But there was a whole lot of fellas that they breathed their last on that island so that we would have the right to go to court and be heard and call witnesses. And let me just talk about that for just a minute, because you're Canadian fellows, they went to Europe too. They went into the Pacific too. I went to Ottawa. I've been to that World War II museum in Ottawa. I recommend that for every human being. If you get within 30 miles of Ottawa and you don't make an effort to go to that World War II museum, then you need to be taken out and kicked or beaten severely with a 2x4. That is a wonderful, wonderful museum. Your people, your young men and women who went in the nursing field. My wife happens to be an RN. All the nurses that risk their lives and put up with all that gore and suffering. I understand it. I know what it's for. And I want the whole world to know what it's for. It's for your right to go into that courthouse down there and have somebody pay attention to you. Listen to me. Excuse me, Your Honor, they took my children. I think we've got to stand up and we've got to understand something is wrong. We don't seem to be even human beings anymore in some places. This is what they died for. God bless them. That's what they died for. They didn't die for the steel mills. They didn't die for General Motors. They didn't die for fields of corn and waving fields of wheat. They died so you would have the right to have liberty and justice for all. And we don't have that. So we owe them.
Yeah.
We haven't finished the job. America hasn't finished the job yet. I want Americans to roll up their sleeves and say, look, if you people in high places in the offices where we've elected you, if you are not going to do the job, then we are going to find out why. We are going to demand that you do what needs to be done so that eventually every person on this planet has a right to be heard, to call witnesses, to make a record, and to have the laws of the land enforced for the benefit of everybody, and whether you're rich or poor or brown or green or blue. And we don't have that yet. And I don't understand why. I really don't. I don't understand why, after all these years, with all these noble goals and aspirations, that we haven't finished the job.
Well, I think it's because we're being trained to be soft, quite frankly. But
Well, we're not buying that anymore, are we?
Well, we're not. So around our world, and the association that we operate through, it's all about where can you take the power and put it back into the people's hands? How about your health? How about, going to a doctor be the last thing that you do? How about, ending up with a lawyer is the last thing after you exhaust all of your other opportunities to self-administer, it's like be self-responsible, right? So that's kind of how we roll around this place. Fair?
Yeah.
And whether it's education, we've homeschooled.
Parenting, or raising our children, our children.
Our child.
Yeah.
We have one. He's 15 and he's been homeschooled the entire time. And we're just doing everything we can to claim it back. And you go seek help when you've exhausted what your capacity is. But you need to put some effort into it first, right? Because effort and willingness seem to be the factors that are missing. And meanwhile, I think there are people, I know you like giving the benefit of the doubt to the profession and the judiciary and who knows, but I don't know, up here in Canada, especially, Canada seems to be this petri dish to see how far the envelope can get pushed for some people's agenda as related to creating different statute code and acts and stuff. And so I think I was telling you in our conversation that, legislation is trying to be put through federally up here that it'd be illegal. No, not even illegal, like a criminal offense to offend somebody, right? for maybe not using the proper pronoun or something like that. And there's speaking of case law, there's a case that happened here in Alberta called Meads versus Meads. It was a custody case or whatever, but Justice Rook made this new ruling, this new decision that they call OPCA, which is organized pseudo-legal. I can't even remember what it stands for, but it's basically aimed at people who have this false idea of like free men on the land. I'm a child of God. I'm like whatever, and I get that because people can definitely come in and waste the court's time. But I think what's also happening as kind of as a byproduct, as like collateral damage, if you will, is when people want to stand up and do exactly what you're doing, how to win in court on my own and take my own stand for what I believe my rights are, and I'm going to come to you to help enforce them. If they don't like it, they just kind of like put you in this catch-all basket of being an OPCA litigant, right? And so it's kind of some of the stuff that we're dealing with up here in the Great White North, if you
And
will.
basic lawlessness too. Like people have been in jail for exercising their right to protest or to state their opinions, and they've been in jail for a couple years now, just for being in a location and committing no crime, and they're still in jail. Like, how do you compel a judge or a lawyer to do their job? And I feel like it's almost we've reached a state of lawlessness in certain situations. Is there a way to hold accountability, to require somebody to be held accountable?
23 years ago, I was hired by a developer from Ottawa. I won't say what his name is because somebody would know who he is, I'm sure. He owned a hotel up there and a whole bunch of apartment buildings, and he owned property in Florida and all over the place. And he was having a hard time because you had a change in something like sort of like a bankruptcy or something. This would have been probably 30 years ago or more. And they were trying to get his money because he had a bunch of it. And as I recall, he had 3 different law firms allegedly working for him in Canada. And one of the things he paid me to do was to try to use the term ride herd on those 3 law firms. And it was really an eye opener for me. I would tell them to do this or do that, and they wouldn't want to do it. And why? Well, why don't you want to push the envelope? Why don't you want to do what this man's paying you to do? Take this person's deposition. File this motion. Serve these requests. And they're afraid. Your lawyers, at least the ones I had to deal with, they were afraid to offend the judge. Well, there you go. So when people that are going to court without a lawyer, you're not going to lose your license. You're not going to lose your license.
True.
I've known lawyers. I had one lawyer in particular, very nice man. I like him a lot. Haven't seen him for quite a while, but he's getting up in age like me, getting to be an old timer. But he was afraid that the judge was going to hold him in contempt, or that he could maybe lose his license for just standing up and doing what his clients were paying him to do. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Oh.
So what do? We sit around and bemoan the fact that the legal profession, it hasn't yet achieved its utmost, highest calling. Or we can just say, okay, well, fine. You want to be that way, be that way. But we, the people, we're going to get this movement rolling here, and we are all going to be educated. We are all going to learn what an objection is. We're going to learn what hearsay is, not what Billy Bob and Sam on their Telegram groups and their little social media things and all these would-be legal gurus. We're actually going to go to the official rules. We're not going to trust all this other stuff. They talked about, free man on the land and the son of, I had one person say he was the son of God. I mean, it went on and on. Or copyright my name, then you can't write my name on the ticket.
Yeah.
Come on. Anyway, people are that far out in the weeds. We shouldn't even pay attention to those people, but we ought to be reaching to those people that do have a brain and do want to learn this stuff. And then we begin to put a stop to the nonsense. Because you don't have to be afraid of that judge. You don't have to wear a wig to go to court. And these other people, they want to wear a wig, fine, wear a wig. And, so you can have a swimming pool and diamonds for your wife or girlfriend. That's what you want to do. You sold out your soul. But when I go to court, and when I encourage other people, when you go to court, Billy and Bob and Jim didn't get to come home from Normandy. And they died for your right to be heard. They died for your right to force this person on the others, force that corporation to produce those documents. I had a lady come to me, I'll tell a story if you don't mind. I had a lady come, she was from Korea. And I don't mean in any way to be pejorative or make fun of the way she talked, but she did talk kind of strangely. And she called me and she said, Mr. Graves, hello, freaks. And when I found out what she was talking about, it was she had one of these Pontiac T-tops, and they all leaked. I mean, people had a problem. It was a well-known thing, a Pontiac T-top. And so we took it, we went through the process. All I had to do was look, here's the law. And there were like, I think 4 different things you had to do to get what they called a lemon law. And we went through all that. And I took the thing to the dealer, and the dealer took a hose and they did like this. And they said, see, it doesn't leak. And I said, well, you better try harder. You better try harder. You better squirt that hose harder instead of just floating that water on her roof. You better squirt it real hard into the cracks and see if it leaks so you can go ahead and fix it. Because if you don't fix it, we're going to have a lawsuit. Oh, so it didn't happen. So the next Saturday, it was raining cats and dogs now. It was so much fun. And she was a nice lady. She was a nurse, very nice young lady. And she called and she said, Mr. Graves, a loof still reeks. The loof still reeks. And so I filed a lawsuit, which brings us to the point of something that every one of you guys can do. Everyone listening to me can do this. It really isn't rocket science. I've proven that for over a quarter of a century by helping tens of thousands of people to learn this stuff. So what I did is I prepared a lawsuit. It was like 3 pages. The complaint was 3 pages, didn't amount to anything. But I also included a request for production of documents, and I sued both General Motors and the local dealership. And I wanted to produce documents evidencing all they knew about the T-top leaking. Then I served them. That was basically maybe only that one request. And then I sent an interrogatory, and the interrogatory wanted them to identify all persons who had complained about their T-top leaking, and what did they do about it. And the request for production of documents, I wanted them to produce all of their notes and information that went back and forth between General Motors and the local dealers when they were telling the local dealers how to fix the leaking T-tops. So that was on like a Friday that got sent over to the lawyers for General Motors and the local dealership. And early the next week, the lawyer from one of those big firms in Tampa, where they have 3 floors in a big tall building downtown. And the young man called me and he said, Mr. Graves, we know your reputation and we want to settle. I'd only been a lawyer for 6 months. I didn't have a reputation. But this is the power that I had to do this for my client. And so she got a new car, and I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000 for her trouble. But it wasn't hard.
I'm
not that smart. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm really not that smart. It's just that I think a very particular way, and it's just a matter of this goes here and that goes there, and this all works, and you put it together, boom, and what's next? And let's get on with our lives. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Lawyers that are charging by the hour, that's exactly what they want.
Exactly.
They thrive on
rather-
the controversy, right? Their livelihood depends on the controversy.
And not and they think not upsetting the judge. I didn't mind upsetting the judge. I found out, get this, I found out that judges appreciated it.
No.
Interesting.
Good judges, and I've only known two that needed help. Almost every judge I ever knew was a good person, and they don't know everything. And you go in there and you help them. You say, well, here's what this is, Your Honor, and this is what the fourth DCA has said about this and that and the other thing. And okay, Mr. Graves, where's the order? I'll sign your order, and that's it. And I don't. It's not because I went to law school. What I learned and what I teach in the course is not about law school. It isn't taught in law school.
Yeah.
In law school is a matriculation to get you into this private club where you have a license to steal.
Interesting. You know, one it's, I think you kind of in a roundabout way kind of touched on the thing that I think stops most people from exploring this stuff. You know, in my other world, like I work in a relationship coaching capacity. And one of the things that always stops people is fear. Okay. And so in this particular case, I think where I identified a possible sticking point is this fear of being called in contempt of court. So do you mind speaking to what is contempt and what is it and like when is it valid, when is it not valid, that kind of thing? Like how could we help people absolve their fear of what this contempt thing is, you know, which might lead to being afraid of offending a judge?
Well, the word comes from a bigger word, contumelious, and to be contumelious is basically, you know, disrespect. But we're not disrespecting the law. Might be disrespecting the judge, but disrespecting the judge is not contempt. I don't have to respect the judge. I remember one judge in particular I have no respect for. Absolutely none. I appealed him. The appellate court agreed with me, and that took a week, 1 week. It was unheard of. But all the other judges, I never have a problem with that, and they appreciated it. But I'm not there. The judge is not the law. If I don't respect the judge, it's got nothing to do with anything. It's of course I don't call him names. I did know a man one time, many years ago. He got arrested in Georgia for speeding, and he asked the judge. He said, "Well, what's the fine for contempt?" The judge said $50, and the man allegedly said, "Well, then you're an SOB," and he paid the $50. But the thing is, I don't. If we don't, we ought. If once we understand the rules, we won't have contempt for the rules.
Right.
We won't have contempt for the system. We have an increasing number of people. This is based on my 25 years of having this website going and having all these emails. We have an increasing number of people that are losing faith in the system.
Yeah.
Now we have to understand when I use the word system, I don't include humans. When I say the system, it's a set of rules, the rules of court, the rules of procedure, the rules of evidence, and appellate court decisions that we use to control judges. That's the system. It's the American system. It's a beautiful system, and when it's operated properly, and somebody's actually doing his job, and he's standing up for his client, or he's standing up for himself. The people that he loves, the system works. There aren't a lot of people in jail that aren't guilty. I mean, if you go to jail and ask them, none of them are guilty. But there'd be a whole lot more people in prison. In fact, I had somebody the other day that got an email, and the guy was talking about that the jury was corrupt. Well, that kind of like burnt me a little bit. I didn't appreciate hearing that. And I told him if it wasn't for the jury, there'd be a whole lot more people in prison and a whole lot of people losing their family and losing their homes and everything else. The jury is one of our protections. He was all bent out of shape because somebody wanted him to wear a mask. Well, okay, maybe he's been out of shape because somebody wants to wear a mask, but we're going to throw the baby out with a bath. I mean, come on. The system is beautiful. We need to be learning about this system, learn what's good about this system, stand up for what's right, and quit complaining about what's wrong so much. If you're not going to do anything about it, great to complain all you want to, but do something about it. Don't just complain. Be a champion for what's right. Be a champion for the cause for liberty that has to be championed. Once again, it has to be championed. And each successive generation that comes along needs to champion this cause of liberty, which is supported totally and absolutely by the system of justice. You can't have liberty without justice. It's crazy. It's an oxymoron.
Okay, so what I'm hearing in that, just in summary, and my takeaway is with regard to overcoming any kind of fear that might be in the relationship of dealing with contempt, you need not worry about contempt of like an individual. It's like the contempt of the law that you need to stay on side with. So as long as you're following the rules of procedure, you're following the rules of evidence, you're doing your different pathways to get evidence in, you're honorably objecting, you're doing all this, there's really nothing to worry about when it comes to contempt, right? And so you don't need to be anybody's friend in there because it's your life on the line.
Yeah, we're not trying to be friends.
Yeah.
No, that's not part of the game. We don't have to be friends, Judge.
Yeah, well, you're talking to some Canadians up here, and we're like, notorious for being nice, right?
So I have a question. Can some of the principles that you teach avoid going to court? Can you do things ahead of time so that you can not even end up in the courtroom? Is this all about when you're already in court? Like what you said, like you served them with this and that, and then they just decided to settle right away. Like I'm thinking oftentimes, because that's what we like to do, and like what we like to teach our son, and is okay, we're adults. We can take care of our problems. We don't need to hire a lawyer, like divorce cases, like family law. It's crazy what people go through. It's like, can't we just sort out our difference and come to a common understanding and move on? So if we could do things like that ahead of time, we could avoid going to court if we were more adult about it.
You have to know the rules.
Right.
Ultimately, you have to get a judge to sign an order. If you got a divorce, for example, sooner or later, you can just separate your ways and go your separate ways. But what happens is, one or the other of the parties wants a bigger piece of whatever's left, or they want custody of the child, and all these fights go on and everything else. But when you get lawyers involved, well, it's money in their pocket, and it's about make it last as long as it could, when really, if you want to get right down to it, it seems to me like the family lawyers should have some kind of moral responsibility, some kind of ethical sense of what's right and wrong, to try to get these two people to get back together with each other. That's not going to happen, but I think it should. I think it should be part of what's going on. I mean, especially when there's children involved.
Absolutely.
Come on, Bill. Apologize to her. Buy her some flowers, take her out to eat. Have some kind of consideration for what she's gone through all these years putting up with you. Be a man.
Absolutely. So, like, if you had two people who were married and they're amenable and they've come to an agreement about whatever they want, they don't want to fight, could they get a divorce without a lawyer?
Yeah, they can. They file what's called a marital settlement agreement, where they say, okay, I've got this much money in the bank, and you've got this, and you get the house, and I get the car, whatever. And then they take that to a judge, and part of the settlement, part of the final order is that the settlement agreement is hereby approved and ratified, and that's it. It's over with. And
So you just go down, they would just go down to the court of the clerk and, or the
There's
clerk
a
of the court
form.
and just say, look, we want to do a marital settlement
Yeah,
agreement to get
can
an
I get
order.
a form? Or you probably could find it online, a marital settlement. I bet I could, if we take the time, I could probably go to Google and go to Canada, go to Manitoba or Saskatchewan or whatever and pull up marital settlement agreement. There'd be a form. You fill it out, take it down, and you get a
There you
divorce.
go.
There you go. Don't do it.
No.
No, it's not. No,
Not
I
us.
just,
Not
I
us.
was actually coaching some people who went through this, and they could have gotten, like, I don't know what that would cost. It'd probably be under $500, I'm sure. And instead, it's going to cost them 10,000, even though they have no controversy.
No controversy, no qualms, no nothing.
You know, it's just like, holy cow, that's just nuts.
People in the States spend $50,000, $100,000 routinely.
Oh, I coached another woman who was like, when we finished our coaching, she was $180,000 in, hadn't even had a family plan done yet.
It's crazy.
It's like, it's nuts.
It's disgusting.
Right. And then you have a lawyer and he or she will encourage these people. Oh no, Bill, you should have the boat.
Yeah.
The boat should go to you. And what's really happening is that fighting over a $10,000 boat is going to cost them $30,000.
Exactly.
It's not right. But let's go back to the positive side.
Absolutely. Well, you know, they happen, so it's good.
Let's imagine a world. Let's imagine a world where people understand the principles, these primary principles for life, where people make up their minds that, doing wrong is never right. That we can live together in peace. But in order to live together in peace, we're going to have a set of rules to live by, whether they're rules in court or they're just rules of, a man and a woman getting along together. I mean, I've been married. I've got a wonderful wife in there. We don't always agree, but we work it out. But people that they don't have any rules. They're just unruly people. We have to get back to that. We have to be civil. We have to be civilized. And in order to do that, we have to be willing to give a little bit. We got to compromise a little bit, but there need to be a set of rules, because when there's no rules, there's anarchy. And the worst thing on earth that can happen to a civilization is anarchy. And we are so close to that right now. We're in a state right now, you might call it social anarchy, because we're so divided. We're so at each other's throats, and we're so rebellious. Somebody's got the idea that rebellion is patriotic. No, we need to get together and be positive about this and find out, what is the judiciary? What is the executive branch? How should it be limited? How should the legislature be limited, and by what? And if you think, and I know you don't, but people that think that their vote is somehow going to change anything, no. Things don't change at the voting poll. You might change who's in power, but you're not changing anything. And we're continuing to go down this road that we've been going down since certainly the Civil War, and then World War I, and then World War II. And all the things that have happened since then, and the 60s with all the rebellion and Woodstock. I mean, I'm not Lily White. I've at least been in a room where people had more. But I can tell you that a lot of things have happened in the past few years in the judiciary that never should have happened. Mm-hmm. And it's evidence to me that what the dean said from the University of Florida Law School is true. The law schools are not teaching these primary principles anymore, and we're not being guided, and we're not. And so what's the answer? The answer is the people, the public, the Canadians, the Americans, the English, the Australians. They need to make up their minds. Okay, we are going to learn this stuff. We are going to find out what you've been hiding. We're going to go to howtowinincourt.com, or we're going to go to the library with all the thousands of books and try to figure it out on our own. We're going to start primary principles for life that makes a civilized world. We want to live in we want peace. We don't want chaos. And now my internet connection is going unstable. So if you want to wind it up, we can wind it up. I just saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and it paused there a couple times. But I do have a quick question that we were talking about. Just one quick question, then we'll wind it up. So, because you talk about duty and, somebody has a duty not to harm. I think there's some basic tenets we can all live by is do no harm to others or their property kinds of things. But is there a duty? Say you have there's a family fight that breaks out because of a will, and then you're trying to figure out this situation between siblings, but one of the siblings brings in a lawyer. Do you have a duty to respond to that lawyer when you were trying to directly figure out your problems and solve them? Or is there a duty to respond to that lawyer if they decide, no, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to hire a lawyer. And now out of the estate, we're going to pay for this lawyer. Like, is there some kind of recourse around that? Because as they're draining what's left there through their choice of going to the lawyer, but that was not agreed upon.
Because you're trying to do the right thing there, right? You're trying to go from me to you, and let's see if we can solve this. And then they throw a lawyer in front.
And unless there's a law that says otherwise, I take the position and encourage people that if you do not have a lawyer and your opponent does have a lawyer, there's no reason why you can't communicate with your opponent directly if your opponent will communicate with you. Now, as a lawyer, if my client's opponent has a lawyer, I cannot communicate with my client's opponent because I'm a member of the bar. It's part of the rules.
Yes.
Again, it all comes down to the rules. But if I were not a lawyer and somebody over here run over my dog and he's got a lawyer, I would think that I would want to explain to my opponent over here that you're going to end up paying this lawyer an awful lot of money. And I just want $1,000 for my dog. He's a purebred Yorkie, and I'm not going to want any more than that. And we don't have to go round and round. And I'll go directly to them. But as a lawyer, I can't.
Yeah.
But there may be a law out there that says that once somebody is represented by a lawyer, then an individual has to go directly through the lawyer. But I don't if it doesn't exist, I encourage it. I think whatever settles the case ought to be in the best interest of the people. It's not in the best interest of the bar. We know that, don't we?
Well, absolutely. And it's, definitely not in this example, at least, it's not in the best interest of the estate either. Because if it's being taken out of the estate. So I get what I hear in that is can you please provide me the law, or I require you to provide me the law that says I need to deal with you instead of being able to go direct because I'm not a member.
That's not his job. You can't compel somebody to do that.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
No, unless they raise the issue. If they raise the issue, now you can make them back it up.
Well, yeah, but they probably receive a letter saying something. We're stop sending letters to so and so. You can send them through us. You must, direct your correspondence to us or something like that.
If the individual on the other side is willing to talk to you, there's no reason they can't.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't do it. You can.
Yeah.
But
But not.
again, it comes. See, none of this stuff. I keep saying this over and over again. This isn't differential calculus. It's not rocket science. There's not one of these rules that's hard to understand. They're not. And before we go, I like to tell people this. The rules of evidence for every federal case, criminal or civil, 19 pages. That's it. Why weren't you told? Why don't, why don't people go to howtowinincourt.com and learn this stuff? Or if you don't want to go to howtowinincourt.com and learn it properly, please be careful who you listen to, because there's a lot of people out there, they have egos. They want to be seen as a guru. They know enough buzzwords to throw them around, but they can't give you the entire picture, and they don't give you the entire picture. And that ends up being a problem. I think it's getting worse and worse. It's going to get to the point where that's going to maybe the ultimate problem, is we have too many people that don't know what they're doing, who are going to court and perhaps causing this OPCA mess. Justice Rook, I made a note about that, because they are not following the rules. And then they get in there and get all angry because, well, but the Constitution says this, and I have a right, and this isn't due process, and this isn't fair, and you're not a good person, and I'm a man on the land, and all this other stuff. And it's like, it reminds me of a judge. I just won a hearing where a lady was angry at my client because he told her husband that she was cheating on him. He told her husband that she was cheating on her husband. And she got all bent out of shape and threw a brick through his window and different, whatever, long story. It was just petty, but I had to do it. And we were leaving the courtroom, it was over with. My clients were walking out the door ahead of me, and the judge said, Mr. Graves, close the door, come back, sit down. I thought I was in trouble. And what he said to me, he didn't go on, he didn't elaborate. He said, I want you to know that the people who were in here before you, the case was about a grandfather putting out cigars on his granddaughter's legs. And what I took from that was that court is serious business. This is not a game. There's some people out there that say, well, I can't wait to find something I can take it to court because it'll be fun. I'll go to court. And then again, Billy and Jim and Bob, Paul and Harry, they bled out on the beach at Normandy. So we could call witnesses and do this the right way, according to the rules. And I think we need to encourage these people that are just completely out of control and just angry, who go to court, they don't follow the rules. And then they're all bent out of shape when the judge doesn't like it. So first, we take responsibility, we learn the rules, we do it the right way. And if you go to my website, there's a button that says testimonials. And if you read those, there's like bunches of them. I mean, really bunches of them now. And you read a whole bunch of those where they'll say that the judge was amazed, the judge thanked me, the other people in the gallery were buzzing because I was doing it the right way. And after all, shouldn't we do it the right way? Isn't that one of the ways that we can honor Billy and Jim and Bob and Susie and Patrick and all these other guys? They didn't get to come home. They never got another piece of apple pie. I can have a piece of apple pie today because of them. Let's honor them by learning what it's all about.
And I think it's also a wonderful legacy we can leave. Like when we take responsibility, we teach that to our children. It's a legacy that we can leave for those who come after us to empower them. I mean, of course, it has to start with younger and just making that part of it. But even if people would see that we can leave this legacy, you don't think far enough ahead anymore. We just care to satisfy our immediate needs, right? We don't think about what mess we're leaving for our children and grandchildren and everybody else who comes after us. So I think it's a really important thing to do for future generations. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we have signed up, folks that are listening, we have signed up to be an affiliate. So we have a very specific link that people can go to sign up, which is?
Yeah, if you don't mind supporting our cause and supporting Dr. Graves' cause, you just go to sovereigncollective.org/winincourt, and it will take you through an affiliate link and take you to Dr. Graves' website. And you can purchase through that, and we can, perhaps receive a couple of shekels to help us with whatever mission that we're on and that kind of thing. So that would be absolutely terrific. I just building on what you just said about the kids, and I know that the kids are a soft spot in your heart too, Dr. Graves. So yesterday I was with our son, who's 15, and he asked, who is it again that you're interviewing tomorrow? And so I mentioned you and your course. And I told him, I said, you know what? It's this kind of stuff that I would really, really like for you to develop some interest in, because if you do, you are going to be so much more confident in how you operate in this world and this kind of thing. And the great news is he seemed open to it. So just saying it in a way that kind of fits into what he wants and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
so happy to support. I'm loving the course. It's terrific. I highly recommend anybody who wants to take more responsibility in their life and grow your, it's a confidence builder too, by the way, huge confidence builder. By all means, hit us up at sovereigncollective.org/winincourt. Take you to Dr. Graves' website.
Yes. Okay.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Dr. Graves. I think you're really doing important work, and I really appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate the course that you make, because we need people like you. This is what I love sharing, is the work of people that are doing great things out there on this podcast, because we need people to kind of condense all that stuff, because not everybody's going to go to law school and see it the way that you did. Not everybody's going to go know nutrition in and out. Not everybody's going to know everything in and out. So I love bringing in these pieces to fit in so that we can fully take responsibility for our lives, protect our families, protect our children, and just own it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Okay, guys, if you like this podcast, please share. This is really important information. Let's get it out there. Let's get it far and wide, because people are suffering injustice in our systems these days. So let's change that and give the power back to the people. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.